we are back, and now we are on my territory where, for some reason, I always end up talking about these awful, awful topics. Today, we're going to talk about how the megachurch leader of a megachurch, which is called La Luz, Iglesia de la Luz. La Luz del Mundo. That's it, La Luz del Mundo. We're going to talk about how their leader, Nason Joaquin Garcia, has been condemned to 16 years in prison for sexual abuse of young little girls. Please follow the text that we have in the news. This is from CBS in the article. And what is so awful and so terrible about this guy? As soon as Nason Joaquin Garcia was condemned, guys, I had to make an episode because this POS, he should be in jail for the rest of his life. But he's going to be only for 16 years because he has so much, obviously so much money. And apparently in California, there are certain laws that if you say, oh yeah, I'm guilty of this, you don't have to pay for all your crimes, only for a small part of them, which I find terrible. Well, as soon as he was condemned to 16 years in jail, the Iglesia de la Luz, they decided to release a statement saying that it was unfair that their leader got jail time. Those disgusting humans, to call them one way, released a letter defending this guy who raped children. And I want to repeat that. They are defending a guy who raped children. They said that they were not allowed to face the victims to question their motives, to talk about the abuse, because obviously if you have some children who were raped, you have to torture them to know their motives. And even worse, in this stupid letter, they are saying that that Nason is going to keep being the leader from jail. He's going to keep earning as much money as 60 freaking churches around the world. Churches in 60 freaking countries can give you. And he's going to keep doing his leading work from jail, and they are going to keep supporting him. So this is awful. We have a situation where there is a guy who has been making child pornography, where people are ignoring everything that he did. He raped children for years, and only 3 cases were admitted, and he pled guilty for those 3 cases to get 16 years instead of the life sentence that he should be getting for this. So is it California the problem? Is it the laws? Are there some pockets getting filled with money? Is there a special consideration to leaders of religious cults? What do you think, guys? Please take this from me.
All of the above. I think this is unlike our first article, which was, this one has been, it's clear, it's clear cut, it's down the line, and this is one where the abuse has been identified, it has been charged, he has pleaded guilty. The sickening thing about this case, for me, and indeed for the victims, is the article tells us outright that a plea bargain was made, and the victims didn't even know this until the very, very last minute. And I don't know how that. I don't know whether that's a California law thing, as Teo said. I don't know. I don't know whether it's throughout America, but it's the fact that only so many charges were brought against him because it decided to make a plea bargain, and the victims weren't even informed about this until the very, very last minute, and there was nothing they could do. I think that is the core of there's something wrong with the justice system that allows that to happen.
I totally agree with you on that.
The courts in the U.S. generally don't care what the victims think about the case. They usually let them do a victim impact statement at the end of the case and let them know and let the court know how it has affected them. but the court doesn't change any proceedings because of the feelings of the victims, which may or may not be wrong. I don't want to argue that point. I just wanted to explain it. But there's definitely too many people that were willing to defend this guy for the heinous act. I mean, he's a piece of human detritus, and I hate to insult detritus that way. The amount of people that came forward to defend him and to defend the Ranigans from our first story today just drove me insane. And it's always the same thing. Yes, but he's a man of God. Well, he might have made one mistake, but he's dedicated his life to God. You know what? I don't care who you dedicated your life to. If you're molesting kids, none of the rest of that stuff matters to me. Right? And that's the way I feel about it. I don't understand how anybody can defend these actions just because of your job, of your chosen profession, right? It doesn't make any. Nobody would say, "Oh, yeah, he molested these kids, but he's a really good chef," right?
Yeah, it's very. I mean, sadly, these types of stories are common enough that you read. I mean, it just seems like, oh, okay, I've heard that before. I mean, I don't want to think that we're becoming accustomed to it or being, what do we call that? Habituated to this kind of thing, right? We don't. I look back to what Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It was one of my favorite shows as a kid, and he always said, "Look for the helpers. Look for the helpers when there's a catastrophe. Look for the people that are cleaning up the mess. Look for the people that are standing up for the people that were victimized. That kind of thing." And so that's what I would expect. If this was in any other context, somebody had been abusing children or taking advantage of vulnerable people. This is our second story tonight, just to make that point. This is the second story that kind of has those themes going to it. I mean, that's how common this thing is. But if we look at the people who should be the helpers, right? We look at these. I was able to find another article on a website called lawandcrime.com. And it's titled, Church Still Stands Behind Convicted Sexual Predator Leader Nason Joaquin Garcia. And you just think, how can that be? I mean, they haven't these people seen? He admitted to doing what he was accused. Here's a quote from that story. It says, in pronouncing his sentence, the judge criticized those that had turned their back on the victims, saying, shame on you. But none of that seemed to deter his followers and church leaders who claimed the prosecution's evidence was, quote, doctored and altered. I mean, they're even making excuses for this guy as they reiterated their support for the man they call their apostle. A statement from church leaders following the sentence stated, our confidence in him remains intact, comparing his prosecution to a path that God has placed in front of him for a reason, as he did for the apostle Paul. Okay, so there we go. There we have that biblical justification of this is just trials and tribulations on our apostle here. Notice who's left out of that assessment there, okay? Richard already mentioned this. We look at, let's see what happened to the victims. Christopher Kellermeyer, whose wife was charged with being Garcia's accomplice and acting as a groomer, which adds a whole new level of disgustingness to it, said Garcia's followers would not be easily persuaded of his guilt. Quote, a lot of people have the expectation that once there was a guilty verdict, whether it be through trial, whether it be through pleading guilty, that loved ones and family members would wake up to the truth. And unfortunately, I see a lot of lamentations of family members, but still just purely drinking from that information trough, only from the church. Okay, I think we have a very vivid analogy being made there. They're drinking the Kool-Aid from the trough, and they're accepting that narrative that he had no choice, that he's innocent, and this is all some kind of farce. And I don't know. I expect more from my fellow human beings. The cognitive dissonance is very strong with these people. We all suffer from cognitive dissonance. And of course, it's very easy to recognize it in other people as opposed to recognize it in yourself. But it's not that the religious leaders are more likely to commit these kinds of atrocities that makes it the most sickening. These people are, and I said this before, and though there are some people that say that positions of leadership do attract these types of personalities, these types of abusive and manipulative personalities, but this person, people are supposed to be safe with him. They're supposed to be feeling offer the protection of faith, the armor of God should be there. It's also that these people offer themselves to their congregations as moral leaders, role models, people to be leaned on in times of need, and then advantage is taken. And it's just utterly sickening. And I can't think of any other word that more perfectly describes this. And it's sad that it just happens all too often. I want to see a congregation, and I imagine it's happened. I haven't seen one. No, I want to see the congregants stand up and say, no, you're out of here. You know, you go off to prison. You're not with us anymore. I want to see that. I want to see a true test of one's commitment to what's right and good, and not simply obedience, which seems to be the key here, which seems to be the case. Loyalty and obedience. That's what's valued, not what's right and good. And so when I hear things like, oh, you can't have objective morality without God, boom, there's my go-to story right there. Let's see, how do you explain that?
Yeah, the problem, this is not going to be a defense, by the way, but just like in the previous cults that we were talking about at the beginning, the cult leaders they know how to manipulate people. For example, as soon as the news of this guy about Garcia, were out, the church forbid all the followers to watch the news, to watch TV, or to follow social networks pages. So they don't get real information. So they only get whatever their church is saying, and it's awful. It's so awful. Because I also want to talk about the victims, by the way. For example, this is terrible about the victims. There were 16 counts that include allegations of raping children and women, which were dropped in order to condemn this guy only for oral copulation, and that's it. And that's why he got that time. But all the raping allegations, producing child pornography, that was dropped, only to be able to condemn him for the other minor ones. And there is one comment from one of the victims that broke me. And it was, let me quote it. On the day Garcia was apprehended 3 years ago, Jane Doe 3, said her mother took her to church to join other worshippers who were crying and praying for him. I knew those tears were not for me. It broke me to stand there, she said as she wept. I couldn't help but feel betrayed. And guys, reading this really broke me. Imagine that somebody raped you and your mother is sad because your rapist is being accused of raping you. And she takes you over there where everybody else is sad because your rapist is going to be judged because he raped you and a bunch of other children. That must be the most awful, heartbreaking experience ever. And whenever I read this type of things, I lose more and more faith and hope in humanity. These type of things break me, guys. It's terrible.
Yeah, and this is not the first time that this organization. I think the organization was, if I remember rightly, was started by his grandmother, and then his father took over. And Garcia's father was also the subject of child sex abuse allegations in 1997, but criminal charges were ever brought there.
Yeah, actually, it was his grandfather that started it.
His grandfather, sorry.
And his father, all of them got accusations. And with the case of his father, he actually was accused by a young man, who was kidnapped, and his body was found with 53 stabs on his body. So, silence in an awful way. And these guys are untouchable. They have the whole city under their power. And when I read the part in the beginning, I found some relation with this, because this church, they are churches. They cannot directly be part of government. But what do? Their followers become part of the government. So now the government is going to follow everything that this church says. And that's why I made the relation that, they are mentioning this person because probably they are afraid something like this could happen. And now this church has so much power because all the guys governing are going to be in favor of the church, and they can do whatever they want. There is an anecdote of this church performing at a special art place that can be used only for cultural things, and the president gave them permission because the president is one of the followers. That is how deep their power, their roots are with their power, and how is that they are so dangerous.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this was I think this was tried in California, wasn't it? This case, and to be fair, the judge there seems to have been outside of that political control, because, and I take my hat off to, it was Judge Ronald Cohen who sat over this case, and his exact words were, "I never cease to be amazed at what people do in the name of religion, and how many lives are ruined in the guise of a supreme being." And you know, he very much was not on the books of this, what is essentially a criminal organization by the sounds of things, a deep-rooted criminal organization. Some of the charges that were brought against them that were dropped included child trafficking and pornography. So it seems this, as Teo was saying, this is a deep-rooted, and it sounds like long-standing generational criminal organization. This is a step in the right direction for kind of, you know, getting attention brought towards them, I think. And let's hope that in Mexico, they follow suit from what's happened in California.
Yeah, you mentioned criminal organization. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Scott. Go ahead, please.
Oh, just a quick point here. You mentioned, Richard mentioned that they're like a criminal organization. One of the things that I found in that other article that I was reading is that a former member of the church has actually filed a civil RICO suit against Garcia and the organization. So they're being prosecuted as a criminal organization. So that's promising. You know, we'll have to see how that turns out. It would be much better if there was a criminal prosecution under, you know, RICO and that kind of thing. But, you know, I guess you can take what you can get, right? Sorry, Kelly, go ahead with what you were going to say.
Oh, no, you don't have to be sorry at all. I just thought that, you know, with the allegations against Garcia's father, it made me wonder if he himself wasn't a victim at some point in his childhood. Not that makes it any better or anything, but there seems to be a history here, and it may be that he grew up believing that this was the way to be, you know, and which is really sad in and of itself, that that he wasn't taught the proper way to do things. He was obviously shown the improper way by his own father, you know, and that's kind of sad in and of itself. And it's something that we need to bring into account in the whole thing too. Like I say, I don't think it's an excuse for what he did, but and one of the things that really got me is that the position that he was in to be able to pick these victims and then use the threat of like eternal damnation against them if they didn't comply with them. That to me is horrific.
Oh,
you know, unless you open yourself up to my sexual advances, you're going to burn in hell. You know, that's just horrific to me.
Yeah, he was Jesus on earth, so they had to follow him.